Well, look, what I'd say, first of all, and I think it's important for your viewers, is that these are workers that in COVID went out there every single day to make sure that critical workers got to work. They themselves were called at the time key workers, and they did that willingly. And now, how these workers are being treated is an absolute disgrace. We've got situations where we've got workers not able to go to the toilet with no toilet facilities. We've got extreme shift patterns that is causing extreme fatigue. And we've got a situation which just overall, the conditions of bus workers are absolutely not what you would expect. And so therefore it's got to quite a critical point, I think. It's got to quite a critical point, and we are seriously looking at how we're going to be able to deal with that outside of negotiations where the operators and TfL don't seem to be listening to these workers.
What have you done about that so far?
So basically we've been doing it operator by operator, and actually the first thing that we needed to deal with was the pay. Some of these workers were on just above £3 above the minimum wage, which is an absolute abhorrence, quite frankly. And so there was the pay of bus workers, which we're still dealing with, quite frankly. But also then we've been dealing operator by operator around the heat, the toilet facilities, assaults on bus workers. There is quite a particular list on that. And the impression that you get is that actually there's a lot of nodding, there's a lot of warm words, but there's very little action in terms of what's going on. I mean, if you just take the issue of toilet breaks and the fact that people need to go to the toilet. You've seen in your report, I mean, this is something that you have identified yourselves, but of course it's something that we know, that people are having to go to the toilet en route in bottles. I mean, this is just not acceptable for this to be the way that things happen. It's completely degrading to these workers, and it cannot continue. You've got heat out there. These cabs are at 40 degrees or 100 degrees Fahrenheit in old money. It's impossible for people to work in that heat. And what we're getting is a computer says no answer. What we're getting is it will be okay in a couple of months, jam tomorrow. And what they need to do is to take these issues seriously.
So is the problem that you've got too many different operators to deal with?
Well, look, I think it's so serious. If you look at what these issues are, and I think that if this was your mum, your dad, your daughter, your son coming home and saying, look, today I couldn't go to the toilet, or I'm not drinking water in case I have to go to the toilet. I mean, that's what's happening. That's what people are actually doing, not taking water in case they need to go to the toilet. Or I'm so tired because my shift patterns are not leaving any proper breaks between one shift and another shift. I feel like I've got jet lag. Or I'm getting spat at work, I'm getting assaulted at work. People will be quizzically thinking, what is your employer doing about this? What is happening here? And the truth is, not very much. And so what I think needs to happen is that the sense of urgency of these issues accumulatively, there needs to be a summit where we are bringing together the operators in London, but not just London, by the way. A lot of this is happening outside London too. The operators and TfL, and if necessary, the government along with the trade union side, to say how are we going to deal with these issues, because they are serious issues that do need to be dealt with now. There's no point dealing with them in 12 months' time. That will be too late.
So already you've got lots of different operators to deal with, but you've also got TfL who kind of recruit the operators to run the buses for them. Do you think you put enough pressure on TfL?
Well, look, we constantly are having meetings with TfL. My team is in those conversations all the time. And I think really what needs to happen now is that TfL and the operators can't keep saying, it's not me, it's the other group, go to the operators. So you meet TfL, they say go to the operators. You meet the operators and they say, well, look, we're going to have a conversation with TfL. The only way to deal with that is to bring everybody, all of the stakeholders together in an emergency summit so we can start to deal with some of the serious issues. Because these issues of fatigue, not being able to take toilet breaks, the heat, the cold, assaults on bus workers, these issues have an impact then on safety of passengers. Because of course, if you've got a situation, and I was appalled quite frankly to hear the response in the interview that you had with TfL quite recently, that their answer to fatigue, where people are jet lagged pretty much because of the shifts, is to prod them in the back in case they fall asleep. Why not do something different to that and try and deal with a substantive issue, which is that these shifts aren't working, these shifts are making people ill, these shifts are actually causing a situation where passengers are now at risk. That is a serious issue. There's been so many near misses that have gone on, so many near misses. Sometime that will go into something quite serious, and these warnings need to be heard.
So negotiations, you're saying, are not working anymore. So another option is to strike. You've got strikes potentially happening as soon as Friday with Arriva North. Why is it just one company going out on strike? Why don't you ballot all of your members across all of the operators to go out on strike?
Well, look, this is exactly what we're doing, and of course some of it happens quicker than others, but actually this is the point that I'm going to be making to government, that actually the Arriva North dispute is over obviously fatigue, it's also over the heat, absolutely, it's also over the controller's behaviour. You know, I mean, what's been said is if you are too hot, if you feel you can't drive the bus, if you feel you are falling asleep, get onto your controller and you will be able to take a break. That is not what is happening in the real world. In the real world, they're being laughed at. In the real world, they're being put under pressure not to take that break. And so what we're saying is that Arriva North are the first to go out, 1,500 workers from Friday, but we are bringing together all of our bus reps in London. We're having the conversation with them. Of course, we're trying to move the operators, but should there be no movement, then of course we have, the only option we have is to say we are going to have to withdraw Labour because they're not listening. And the interview that was done with TfL with yourselves quite recently tells me that either they're completely not in touch with reality or they're ignoring the problems that are staring them in the face. And the only way that we can get people to listen is by the bus workers now saying, quite frankly, we've had enough. This is the end of the line. Now, I'm going to be raising this with government quite seriously in terms of the fact that, look, this could bring London to a standstill as far as the bus service is concerned. But it's not just in London, outside London as well. These issues are there also. We need to have a serious look at what is happening within the bus industry across the board.
I mean, obviously passengers don't want strikes, but people can understand that it does seem that potentially you do need an all-out London bus strike to get the government's attention.
I mean, the reality is the passengers, I have to say, have been so supportive of the. They can see and feel, quite frankly, themselves how hot it is. Can you imagine when you get on a bus and you're on a journey for 15 minutes, you're getting off, you know, fanning yourself, feeling absolutely sweating when you're walking off a bus. This driver's got to be on this bus for hours and hours and hours with no system whatsoever. Now, obviously, as I say, these are cumulative issues and they have a knock-on effect to each other. You know, you have the situation of shifts, then you have fatigue, then you've got the heat, then you've got the violence against bus workers. I don't think any viewer of yours would want to have any member of their family going out into an environment like that, either to drive a bus or to be on a bus, because of course this is now making the bus service unsafe. And it feels to me that we have been raising these issues for such a long time and there is nobody listening in a proper way. We've tried to do it by operator, that has not worked. We've tried discussions with TfL, that has not worked. The only thing now is to get the government involved to say this is just not an acceptable pattern of behaviour, and that has got to stop.
Would you say the union has done enough?
Well, look, the union has definitely been pushing on a whole range of issues. So, for example, you know, over the last 4 years, we've been really pushing on pay. So pay's been a huge issue for us as far as what's happening to bus workers' pay. Bus workers' pay has gone down incredibly. When you look at the profits that have been made in some of these operators, you know, why are they making these eye-watering profits and they haven't been pushing up pay of workers? So in a cost of living crisis, the absolute key thing was pay of workers. And of course, there has been multiple strikes in relation to that. We've had huge wins in terms of pay of bus workers across a number of operators, but we've had to put our foot down to get it. And so therefore, because of cost of living, pay was absolutely critical. Obviously, conditions matter. You know, there's no point having better pay if the conditions are quite literally killing you. And so therefore, of course, we have been pushing because, look, most unions don't want to go out on strike. Most unions don't want to be in a position where workers are putting in a position to withdraw their labour. Most workers don't want to do that. But I have to say this really clearly, I'm not going to accept, as the General Secretary of Unite, these workers who went out in COVID, who went out when they were asked to go out, who were treated as key workers then, to be treated in this way now. The heat wave is not a surprise. We've known that it's been happening. We're on our 5th. We're likely to have a 6th. And what I think is completely wrong, particularly in the interview that was done with TfL and yourselves, is that they're talking about air conditioning as though it's air conditioning that you and I would understand air conditioning to be. What they have is air cooling, which is a totally different situation where warm air is just going around and around and around. They should put air conditioning units into the cab so that drivers can drive safely and in a proper temperature as far as that's concerned. They just need to get the shifts sorted out. If this was Germany, in Germany, you're not able to drive for more than 1.5 hours without having a toilet facility at the beginning and a toilet facility at the end of your shift. Not a third-party toilet facility. They've been asked to go to Pret-a-Manger and go into the toilet there. Well, Pret-a-Manger is not open at 7 o'clock at night, so what are they supposed to do then? And they're relying on third parties to act cooperatively and change their business model in order for a bus worker to go to the toilet. There are simple solutions here that happen in other countries, and we need to make sure that those solutions are happening here.
But don't we have a 150-minute bus rule here, which I think the union agreed to along with TfL and the operators?
So there's lots of different schedules in lots of different places, but things change. Things change, and the reality here.
But didn't you agree to the 150 minute?
Unions previously in local negotiations have agreed to a lot of things. So they've agreed to the 150 minute. They've agreed to a whole range of different things.
Was that a mistake?
Well, at the time, it was what people thought was the right thing to do because in the stage that we were there. But we're not in the same situation now. The situation now has changed completely, and this is the problem about TfL: is that you can see the world is changing before you. You can see that actually the heat is getting worse. You can see that actually we're going into our 6th issue in terms of a heat wave in Britain, and they've got their fingers in their ears, relying on rules that came in ages ago, under rule books ages ago.
So will you push to get that 150-minute rule changed?
It needs to change. I mean, and we've been saying that it needs to change. We've been saying really clearly that these shift patterns and the way that they are not working. We've been clearly saying that. We've been clearly saying that actually today now, and of course things are always put in place. They're put in place, years and years and years over time. I've got thousands of negotiations with employers where things were put in place 5 years ago that wouldn't be appropriate now, and those employers understand that because things change. Heat's one of them. Shift patterns are another thing. More advice comes to the fore. How can you have somebody on a late shift then doing an early morning shift, and you're not even having 11 hours in between those shifts? Now we're asking for 12 hours in between those shifts. We're asking for the shifts to be put in a much better way also to make sure that those shifts can have toilet breaks at either side of them. If we were in Germany, they wouldn't be in this position. And the question that I'm asking is, why can we not even do the basics? I saw in your interview that TfL was saying in 12 months it will be better. I mean, if this was a construction site, a portaloo can go up within 12 hours. So why is it taking 12 months to get these proper secure facilities that bus workers can use? So we've been calling for these changes. They are falling on deaf ears. That my team have been out there trying to move operators. That isn't working. And the difficulty you have is that if you cannot get people to listen, then of course strike is the last option. But we don't want it to get there. The workers don't want it to get there. And what we are saying to government is, it's clear that TfL have got their fingers in their ears. It's clear the operators have got their fingers in their ears. We need some intervention so that these workers are treated properly.
There is obviously a heat task force that's just been set up. There's been a meeting. Is that going to work? Was that a success? Did you go to that meeting?
Well, these meetings are happening across a number of areas. And of course, what I've said now is that in terms of this summit, is that we need to bring together all of our stewards across all of the areas in London and beyond so that we can agree and decide what it is
so
and how we're going to push.
So the heat task force doesn't have everyone there?
No, it doesn't. The heat task force, quite frankly, in my view, hasn't worked. It isn't going to work. And what this is another jam tomorrow discussion. Look, there are some issues that are really quite serious but quite simple. You have a fatigue issue that can be dealt with quite simply by the shift changes. I mean, if they want me to write the shifts for them, I'm quite happy to come in and do that for them. It's not rocket science. It's a shift pattern that just needs to be agreed properly with the union and negotiated. You have a situation with heat that requires air conditioning. And if there isn't proper air conditioning, you're going to have to allow breaks. I mean, even in the World Cup, where the heat was, people are running around for, an hour and a half or whatever it is. They had hydration breaks. The reality here is you cannot put these people into this situation and expect them to continue doing their role. It's impossible for them to do their role.
Task force. You're calling for a summit,
yes.
Which would be obviously a good idea, getting all of the operators there. But all of the operators are supposed to attend this heat task force. Isn't that a good starting point? And to get bus drivers on board and to use those meetings.
Because the problem with it is there's not proper leverage on it. So basically what happens is this is all done in piecemeal. Have a heat task force over here, have someone looking at shifts over here, have someone looking at toilets over here, have someone looking at assaults on bus workers over here. We've had a bus worker punched to death this year. Punched to death. We've had people spat at. We've had people dragged out of their cab this year alone. And so therefore it's gone too far for this to be a task force, whatever that means. It's gone too far for that. What we now need is to say, look, actually, this has hit a critical point. I've got members out there who have been dragged out of their cab and assaulted. I've got members out there who are holding on to going to the toilet because they're unable to actually go to the toilet, who aren't drinking water in a heat wave in case they go to the toilet. I've got members out there who are looking at this and saying, actually, is this a job I want to continue doing? The retention rates of bus workers is not looking very good because it's not now a job that people are thinking this is a job for me long term. And there are consequences to what's happening to bus workers. To me, what I think is really clear, and I will be speaking to Andy Burnham directly about this, what is really clear is the situation in buses has to change. Now, either these operators take the responsibility of the health and safety of bus workers properly, because that's what we're talking about, and of course, by doing that of passengers, because the near misses have been as a result of some of these things happening, or they don't. And if they don't, maybe we should look at public ownership of buses. Maybe we should just say, well, look, hang on a second, there's evidently profit in this system. That profit seems to be feeding salaries and shareholders. Shouldn't that profit be put in to make sure that we're paying people properly and the conditions they work under are proper, so that the public are safer as a regard of that? I think it's gone way beyond task forces. We need a summit, and I would really like a representative of the government at that summit, so at least everybody's around the table and know this has been taken seriously. We need legislation changes, for example, on assaults on bus workers, so that they are treated the same as emergency worker assaults. I mean, it's almost like come on and spit at a bus worker or drag them out of their cab or worse. Is seem to be everyday fare. It's not acceptable. And so to me, it's gone beyond all of those things, which is why I am personally now being involved in this. I'm personally now going to be leading this from the union. And I'm going to be personally speaking to Andy Burnham to say, look, this has gone beyond anything that is acceptable for workers to come to work in. This is now at crisis point.
I think everyone would agree with that. But why do you feel that it's taken so long to get to this point? Because we had surveys in 2018, 2019, the Bill of Rights was suggested in 2024, the London Assembly has unanimously said that they agree with the Bill of Rights. What are the sticking points? Why is it taking so long? That's like 8 years.
Well, it's literally, from my point of view, is they're not taking it seriously. They're just not taking it serious. Now, when I came in to be General Secretary, of course, I wasn't General Secretary in some of those periods, and one of the things that was really clear to me, first of all, was the pay. Actually, of workers across the board. I took over within the cost of living crisis, and to me the most important thing that we do is jobs, pay, conditions, and the pay of bus workers, as can I just say other workers in Britain, was being suppressed through austerity over years and years and years, and so therefore getting the pay up is absolutely critical, and of course that is happening and we're beginning to do that.
Is that what's taken more of the energy, do you think?
Well, no, because the energy's on everything. You can't have energy just on one thing, but the reality is, of course, when you are going to food banks and you are at work, when you're going to food banks and you can't feed your children on a wage where you're working hours and hours and hours, priorities being raised were effectively around pay. Pay, of course. I mean, obviously, if you can't heat and eat, then you need your pay up. And when you've got huge profits like you are in some of these bus companies, then we need to make sure these workers are treated fairly. But heat has been. Cold has been raised. I mean, not just recently, but over many, many years, going way back, this has been raised. And the truth is, what they are absolutely clear on is they will only discuss it operator by operator. They don't want to discuss it together. They give silly sort of excuses about cartels and reasons why they can't do that. And the real reason they don't want to do that is they don't want to have something that governs across all of them to say, you have responsibility to the health and safety of your workers. That is your responsibility. Now, obviously, the heat waves have compounded this, but the fatigue has been something that's gone on for quite some time. The shift patterns have gone on for quite some time. The assaults on bus workers have been absolutely outrageous. Now, we deal with those in separate instances, and of course I'm speaking to government about legislation change because I believe that they need to be saying much more strongly, this is unacceptable for these workers to be treated in this way. Again, I make the point because it is an important point. When COVID was going on, these workers were treated like key workers. They were told they were key workers because they were getting critical workers to work. And now COVID is over, they're almost being told, well, it doesn't matter what your conditions are. It doesn't matter that you can't go to the toilet. It doesn't matter that you are sweltering in heat that nobody else would be able to deal with. So it's gone beyond all of those things. I now I'm going to be requesting that we have that summit. I'm going to be requesting that government is involved in that. And these things are easily fixable. This is not rocket science that we're talking about here. This is not a huge undertaking from anybody. It's the will that's required to do it. We can't do it piecemeal. It's taking too long. And quite frankly, we will never get them in the same position. That's the problem. And that's been why it's such a problem.
How would you respond to an accusation that you might be too close to the mayor and that you're not tough enough on TfL? You've got too good a relationship with them.
Well, I would say I don't have actually a good relationship with TfL. I mean, anybody who knows me as the General Secretary of Unite will know really clearly, and in fact it was one of the most important pillars of how I became the General Secretary of Unite. For me, it's jobs, pay and conditions of workers. And I don't care the colour of the rosette of anybody in any position. If you are not standing by workers, then I'm going to make that and say that very, very loudly. I've done that with the Labour government up to now on a whole range of different issues, whether that be cost of living, whether that be winter fuel, a whole range of things. And I have certainly done that with TfL on a whole range of issues. And from my point of view, nothing is more important to me, nothing is more important to me than what is happening to workers at work. And so therefore what I would say to TfL is to take your fingers out of your ears and see what's happening to London bus workers, and not only to bus workers but also to passengers who are using buses. It has got to such an emergency point that we need to do something quite quickly, and I was appalled, if I can say, in the way that TfL responded to the interview with yourself when it was almost to come back and see me in 12 months. Come back and see me in 12 months. Well, I can just say directly now, if they do not move very quickly, then Unite will have no other course of action, then we will have to ballot across the entirety of London Bus. Now, we don't want to do that. The workers certainly don't want to do that, but they cannot continue to work under this strain and in this environment. It's not possible for anyone to do that.
You're the first female General Secretary of Unite the Union. Why should you be re-elected? You're up for re-election. You might find out by Friday.
Well, actually, they've been posted and counted now. Counted now. So the count's actually going on right at the moment. And of course, what I have said, and what was the real difference between me and the previous General Secretary, is that my absolute focus is jobs, pay and conditions of workers. It's the most important thing. You know, I'm a General Secretary that's out in negotiations, that's on picket lines. I'm very much sort of a workers' General Secretary. I'm absolutely there with workers, and my membership sort of seen a real sort of step change in that. And the reason that I hope people have voted for me, because obviously the voting has now stopped, is because they can see that I am fighting for them. And that's a really important thing, that I fight for workers. And people will have seen that when I came up against Keir Starmer over a whole range of issues to say, look, it doesn't matter whether we're affiliated to Labour, we are by rule, but we won't be affiliated much longer if Labour don't show that they're there for working class people and workers, because my priority is that. Labour comes second to that.
Okay, Sharon Graham, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.